now halfway through the book of Revelation, and it's only taken how many months? I was originally intending to go through chapters 12 and 13, and discovered that chapter 12 has so much in it, so much happening in it, that Eric wisely suggested that I might want to pare that down, and he's right. So, just to catch up a little bit, so last time we saw John receive a small scroll that he ate. And apparently that wasn't a thing back then. No, it wasn't a thing back then. It was sweet, but it gave him indigestion. By chain of custody, it seems to have been derived from the scroll that was handed to Jesus, which then goes to a strong angel, who then appears to John and tells John to take this and eat it. So he absorbs the prophecies that he's going to have to now give to the nations. From that point on in the book. Okay. So, following that, we had a vision of John being given a measuring instrument, a rod, that he was supposed to use to measure the temple, the altar, and the worshipers. Now, I'm not sure that the idea was that he's going to see how tall each of the worshipers is. And then the scene shifts to something completely different, so it would seem. It's followed by the story of the two witnesses going out and preaching during a horrible, terrible, very bad time that we often call the tribulation. But their ministry looks a lot like that of Moses and Elijah. And in fact, they actually appear in that order in the story. If you follow the kinds of plagues that are provided, that they do, you find out that the Moses ones come first and then the Elijah ones come. Just a caution though about formulating doctrine from passages like this. So, if the two witnesses are two literal individuals who have amazing ability to call down plagues, sorry, and if it occurs exactly the way described in the vision, and there's only one rapture, you would then have to conclude that the rapture occurs 3.5 days after they die. So just choose your assumptions wisely. If it's literal, then you actually have kind of a time stamp of when things are likely to happen. And I know that most evangelicals don't quite look at it that way. So, a couple of things to note though. Why two witnesses? God's law requires at least two witnesses before he judges. So think of Sodom and Gomorrah. God sends two angels in there, they look about, things happen, and they realize, okay, no, this has got to go, this has got to stop. And Elijah brought Israel back to God through a sacrifice that challenged the pagan gods. Whichever God brings fire down from heaven will be the real God. And at the end of it all, the people are chanting, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." It brings the people back to God, with the possible exception of Jezebel. And then Moses is the one who leads Israel out of slavery. So we have a turning back to God, and we have a turning out of slavery. Those are the images that come up the moment you think about these two biblical heroes. And does it make sense for those things to come in the exact order that they do? You have judgment, repentance, and deliverance. So how might John be measuring the temple, the altar, and the worshipers, if that happens immediately after, would be by their witness. So you have the temple and the witnesses These are God's manifestation, the place that God is convicting of sin. You have the altar and Elijah. It's Jesus' sacrifice that brings people back to God. And then you have the worshipers at the altar. Moses is the prophet that God used to bring people out of slavery. And of course, those who are out of slavery are the redeemed on their way to the promised land as they repent and believe. Okay, so that's the recap. Revelation 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Now, anybody care to guess what the number 12 represents?
12 tribes?
The 12 tribes of Israel, yeah. This is representative of the people of Israel, or a little more broadly, the people of God, as you'll see. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Now, something about Israel that you might not kind of put together is that Israel was actually in a covenant with God, which is sometimes even called a marriage covenant by the prophets, particularly Hosea. So this child that she's about to give birth to is actually an illegitimate heir, if you will. But she's got a crown. So this beautiful woman, radiant, is a queen. She represents Israel. She's married to God by covenant. Now remember that Gentile Christians are, as Paul puts it, grafted into the people of Israel. We are grafted into the rootstock of Israel. So the crowned woman actually just represents God's people. The people who believe, the people who follow, the people who have repented and come to the Lord. So there's that one sign. There's another sign in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Now we know how the story goes, right? Princess gets locked in the tower, and Prince Charming has to come and rescue. No, that's not the story at all. Its tail, 7 crowns on its head, 7 heads. This is authority. This is power. This is this is evil. Its tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. In a way, that's the story of Herod and Jesus' birth, but it's beyond that. But we're not told that the dragon himself is cast to earth yet. So he's dragged a bunch of angels down to earth. We're not told yet that he himself has been cast down to earth. Verse 5, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter, and her child was snatched up to God at his throne. Of course, Jesus' ascension, right? But notice that there's kind of a time compression going on here. It's a vision. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. 1,260 days. What a puzzler. Does that mean that she and Joseph were in Egypt for 3.5 years? We're not given that kind of detail about how long they were in Egypt. But verse 5 is actually a parenthetical thought, about who Jesus is. Who is Jesus? The one who will rule the nations with an iron scepter. And he's the one who was snatched up to God on his throne. So if the part about being snatched up to heaven is part of the parenthesis, then the 1,260 days may represent the time Mary, Joseph, and Jesus were in Egypt. Although most commentators will insist that that number of days is symbolic of a period of persecution and protection. If it's not part of the parenthesis, then there's some really compressed time of events going on here. because Jesus is approximately 33 years old when he goes up to heaven. And the impression that you get is that he's popped out and up he goes. We read in Acts 8 about a great persecution in Jerusalem that drives the church out of Jerusalem into Judea, Samaria, and eventually spreading the church into Ethiopia and Syria. Antioch being the most famous example, where Saul intends to root it out in Acts 9, but is converted on the way. The woman flees into the wilderness. Anything outside of Jerusalem in this imagery is wilderness. So from there the church spreads throughout Asia Minor, through Macedonia, through Greece, Rome, and it moves too quickly for the enemy to keep up. At one point, Paul is waiting in jail for the Jewish opposition to show up in court, and they don't show up. So this church has spread too fast for the opposition to catch up. And even in John's day, a lot of the opposition, almost all of it, was from Jewish people, Jewish believers. Whether they were the Judaizers in the church, or they were the official Jewish religious representatives who wanted to keep their position in the Roman Empire. So anything outside of Israeli territory might well have been considered wilderness. And I think that's where that 1260 days is about. If ever there was a religious wilderness, it was the Roman Empire. I just want to have a little bit of fun with prophecy here, though. One of the ways that people could think about these days, if you thought of it as a day for a year, Emperor Constantine decreed Christianity as an officially tolerated religion in 308 AD. And a couple of generations later, Theodosian declares it the official religion of the empire in 380 AD. You add 1260 to those, and it gives us a range of about AD 1574 to 1640 for the decline of relative protection within the Roman Empire. Note that the empire officially expired in 1455 at the fall of Constantinople. Things that might have affected the church's protection since then. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, Copernican Revolution, Galileo's observations about heliocentrism, etc., etc. Now, that was not intended as a serious prophetic interpretation. I just wanted to show that people could have all kinds of different interpretations of that kind of numerology. It's hard to know, but 1260 days is probably a symbolic number. It's a time of the church being in the wilderness, basically protected, but not entirely persecuted. All right, verse 7. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. And presumably that means the devil and his angels. When did or does or has that happened? The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. So is that war in heaven a past event, future event? One very reasonable objection, for instance, to it being a future event is in Luke 10, verse 18. Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Okay, did that happen during Jesus' ministry? Did he actually see that happening? Did he see that happening before? And just remember, though, that the context His Jesus' disciples are casting out demons even before his ascension. So Jesus is probably looking forward prophetically, I think the technical word is proleptically, to Satan's ultimate downfall. I suspect that's what's going on there. But there are more clues to the timing in the next few verses in Revelation. First, a couple of references in Daniel. Did I say blur? Okay. So, Daniel 11, verse 36 and 37, the king will do as he pleases. Now, this is a king described in a few other verses in a moment. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god, and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. So, he's going to be successful until a time of wrath. And there may be something going on about a time of wrath later on in the book of Revelation. Down in verse 45 of that same passage, he, that is the king of the north, will pitch his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he will come to his end, and no one will help him. At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. But at that time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. So, there's a time when some angelic, powerful being named Michael, who, by the way, earlier on is described as having defeated Satan in battle and driven him to the earth, will arise. So is that a clue? Something strange? A clue. And I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. They triumphed over him, past tense, by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He's filled with fury because he knows his time is short. So, some of the clues from those passages, that salvation, the kingdom, and the authority of the Messiah have arrived, and there are no more accusations in heaven. Brethren have already triumphed by the blood of the Lamb and their testimony, even to the point of death. And then there's joy in heaven, but woe to the earth and the sea. And then you compare that expression to the trumpet plagues in chapter 8. What do they do? Blood in the waters of the sea. Blood in the waters on land. All of these things perhaps point to shortly before Jesus returns, at least in the order that they're described earlier in the book of Revelation. So, my suspicion, if you will, is that these are a later event that has not yet taken place. Verse 13, when the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time out of the serpent's reach. Okay, so is this a different description of the same thing earlier in the chapter? Another clue, Daniel 12, verse 7. The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time, when the power of the holy people has finally been broken, all of these things will be completed. So there's where you get the reference to a time, times, and half a time. And it seems to be connected to a time when the power of God's people is broken. What does that mean? 25, he will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. Now, do you get the impression that the holy people are free to go out and evangelize and spread to the world without intense persecution? Or is this a time when the nations of the world are trying to completely eliminate Christianity? For time, times, and half a time. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So the most persuasive explanation I've ever seen relates to propaganda from without and within Christian communities. So for instance, Revelation 2 verse 9 and 3 verse 9 speaks of the synagogue of Satan that slanders Christians, that slanders the church. They're liars. It's an internal opposition of Judaizers, but also an external Jewish opposition at the time. So a propaganda war against Christianity, because it's coming from the mouth, right? It's not coming from the claws, it's not coming from the teeth, but just out from the mouth. Revelation 2 verse 20 speaks of a Jezebel who teaches believers, drawing them into sexual immorality and eating of food sacrificed to idols. Revelation 2 verses 6 and 15 speaks of those who hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans and their practices. Again, a propaganda war. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. So, waging war, it takes it to another level. And I think that relates to the time spoken of in Daniel. Waging war against the church, waging war against the Jewish people. All of that. Daniel 7 verse 21. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High. And the time came when they possessed the kingdom. So, whether it be in China or Russia, India, Pakistan, Africa, persecution and murder cannot destroy the church. There'll always be people who have accepted the gospel and spread the word. And like in Germany during the Third Reich, there will be people who, not believers themselves, will have more courage and hide believers from the jackbooted thugs of oppressive regimes. So the earth will help and can help. But usually individual Christians will be persecuted, the ones who witness about Jesus, and some even tortured and killed. But their witness will live on in the hearts of many who see how they live out their faith. Peter makes something, a really fascinating statement in chapter 2, verse 12. As he encourages believers to live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. There's something powerful to that. They see your good deeds and glorify God on the way the King James puts it, on the day of visitation. And I haven't spoken about Charlie Kirk yet, but I think he is a marvelous marvelous example of that. There'll come a time when people remember him, when God visits them, and they'll see, oh, we killed him. Well, not specifically the whole crowd, but he was killed because he was glorifying God. He was killed because of his witness. And many people see and understand that he did good. He was proclaiming Jesus. And even perhaps the killer, on the day God returns, the day Jesus returns, will have to acknowledge God's glory. Okay, I've got a couple of slides in there that would be for the next time. I'm going to just read something that relates perhaps less directly. In 1 Chronicles, chapter 17, starting halfway through verse 10. God is making a promise to King David. I declare to you that the Lord will build a house for you. When your days are over and you go to be with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, one of your own sons or descendants. And I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for me, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. I will never take my love away from him as I took it away from your predecessor. I will set him over my house and my kingdom forever. His throne will be established forever. Jesus is building a house for God. And he's building it out of the strangest building materials you might ever consider. He's building it out of you and you and you and you and you. Framing it together. Bringing us, all Christians around the world, to become a glorious habitation. We are already a habitation of the Holy Spirit. As John takes down all of these visions from Jesus himself, he has a pastoral mission in mind. It's not here to warn us about, how to hide from the hard times. It is to tell us that the hard times are here to forge us into the most glorious building you could ever imagine. That's the good news. The good news is through the trial, through the danger, he will turn us into a people who glorify him. That's a pastoral concern. He wants us to be the best that he designed us to be. I'll have to continue with the beasts next time. Beauty is the church. The dragon isn't able to destroy the church. He'll try very hard. And he's trying very hard even now. But next time, chapter 13.